welcome to yet another edition of Fourth Estate here on ZTN Prime, Channel 294, where we tackle all things media and journalism in Zimbabwe. My name is Tinomda Chakanyuka. Today we are looking at press freedom. Now, today's episode comes on the back of the recently marked World Press Freedom Day. And to discuss this, I am joined in the studio by Richard Mahomba, Director for International Communications in the Ministry of Information. Welcome to the show, Richard.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
And I'm also joined by Perfect Hlongwane, the Secretary General of the Zimbabwe Union of Journalists. Welcome to the show, Perfect.
Thank you, Tim.
Now, to start with, gentlemen, on the 3rd of May, journalists all over the world celebrated World Press Freedom Day under the theme Shaping a Future of Rights, Freedom of Expression as a driver for all human rights. What is your take on this theme? I'll start with you, Perfect.
Thank you. The theme actually then tells us about the importance or the role that the media plays in every facet of our life. So you see that the issue of human rights then becomes central and very important. And press freedom then becomes one of the most critical issues for us to ensure that we uphold human rights. And the theme really does speak about how important the media or the role the media plays in ensuring that human rights are upheld, as it were. What we have seen is that we've been saying in commemorating World Press Freedom Day, we are introspecting as a country. We are looking back as the media, as an industry, to say, where have we been in ensuring that we have press freedom in the country?
So we introspected.
Yes.
Where have we been?
Yes, I think we are coming from somewhere and obviously going somewhere. What am I saying? I'm saying that what we have been seeing previously is that, especially in the country, is that media freedoms have not really been given, as it were. We have had laws that really were minimizing the media space, minimizing the enterprise of journalism and journalists. And the reform agenda that we have seen so far, I would say probably starting with the Constitution in 2013, that then deals with freedom of the press and access to information. Then you move on to what this government has done, where we saw the repeal of IPA as one of the ways to ensure that the space,
the media space
is liberated, is free. And the enactment of the Freedom of Information Act, and the other such acts that supports. You would understand that at the moment the government is talking about the ZMC amendment bill. We are also talking about the Broadcasting Services Amendment. Those are some of the issues that want to make sure that the space, as it were, is liberated. We have seen this government also issuing out licenses to radio stations, TV stations across the country, including community radio stations. And we think that it is a development in the right direction.
We'll come to that, to the licensing of community radio stations and, of course, commercial television stations. But I would also want you, Richard, to kind of take us through the impression you get from this theme, shaping a future of human rights, freedom of expression as a driver for all other human rights.
Basically, this theme accentuates or emphasizes the importance of democracy in our contemporary politics. In the sense that, you see, democracy is a debate. Democracy is divergency in thought, but fighting to celebrate and preserve the other person's right to express themselves. So for me, I think this theme is anchored on the universal principle of democracy, the very same democracy that forms the key pillars of our independence values, to say we need to embrace dissent, we need to converge at some point around the national question. And whenever the aspect of rights is also brought to the fore, we are saying all of us are competing within the national question space, and we are competing within that space with many standpoints of diversity. And democracy should enable that to happen, because democracy in essence is a debate. And how have we operationalized that? We have operationalized that through the Constitution, because remember we had the Lancaster Constitution, but again, the post-Copac Constitution has also reiterated that in section 60, 61, and all of that. And we are seeing the mushrooming of new media spaces, and beyond the conventional media landscape, you have got your social media coming into the fore, breaking the monopoly of the conventional prism of media. So there are these new evolutions that are preparing the future for the preservation of human rights outside conventional terms, outside structural terms. So that's my take.
Okay, you mentioned the opening of the media space. The media space is opening up, but some argue that when you look at the television stations, the radio stations that are being licensed, one will get a sense that yes, we are getting media plurality, but without diversity.
Well, I think that's a very abstract concern, because in my view, I think whenever any media house launches itself to the public domain, it obviously seeks to speak to a particular niche market. And apart from that, there is no homogeneous or linear editorial frameworks across all media. You'd agree with me in that respect. So for us to say that diversity is not ushered in, it's quite problematic, because when we look at institutions like yourself, ZTN, how you have been able to bring in different political players to debate on issues from their different political backgrounds. And again, when we talk of community radio stations, we are saying our national identities are not linear. So issues that are raised by a community radio station in Masvingo cannot be similar issues as those that are raised by a radio station in Bulawayo, because they speak to the geopolitical issues of their respective jurisdictions and communities. So I think that is a very abstract concern. Probably that is hinged on erstwhile paranoia of an environment that was not hospitable to diversity. And you cannot ignore the reality of that perennial footprint emerging in our discourse to say, there is no diversity and all of that. I think we have to embrace the new and put up initiatives that ensure that diversity is realized.
I'll pose the same question to you,
Yeah.
Perfect. As a media practitioner,
Yes.
do you feel there is enough media diversity?
Well, I want to disagree totally with Mawomva that it is an abstract concern. Because what we have seen and what we know is that in most cases, media as it is driven mostly by ownership, right? Who owns the media house? And what people are saying is, or the complaint is that people that were issued with licenses seem to be people who are aligned to a particular political party. And the fear, therefore, is that their political leanings and their political persuasions will be smuggled in the editorial of those media houses. And this is where the concern is, that if we are going to have diversity, let's allow the licensing processes to be as wide as it is across the spectrum. But let me also touch on the issue of community radio stations. He says community radio stations then speak on the geopolitical issues of a particular region, community and stuff. As it stands, community radio stations themselves are not allowed to speak or to have programs that are political. They're a no-go area, right? And that alone actually goes back to the issue that, yes, we have multiple radio stations, but we have controlled content on those radio stations because they are not allowed to speak about politics, about elections.
But how do you separate politics from the day-to-day issues that affect different communities? I'm looking at, for example,
The price of bread?
The price of bread,
yes,
availability of water,
Yes.
roads,
Yes.
clinics within a particular
So
community.
I'm saying, for instance, at the moment they cannot have debates, political debates, where they're bringing in political parties to debate, right? On their programming. They cannot do that. They are supposed to deal with, developmental matters, issues that that affect probably health issues that affect. I know that those issues are political in nature, but when it comes to the real subject of politics and or elections, as we are heading towards an election, they are not allowed.
Maybe you may want
just
to
I think
respond.
what I seem to be getting from my good colleague is that I don't know if there's a specific legislation that hinders them, which I doubt is there. But I think the import of his argument is that these stations are not supposed to be partisan. Because when you then say they are not supposed to be political, you then drive a notion to the public that discourses that they put across are mainly supposed to be trivial. Because I argue that every aspect of life is political. The price of bread, electricity problems and all of that, shortage of water, those are political subjects. You may not necessarily need to have figures from political parties to discuss those issues. So maybe the import of his submission, which I think has no legislative grounding at this point, I think the import of his submission is that they are not supposed to be partisan. And maybe let me expand on that from a hypothetical point of view. We have suffered polarization as a people to an extent that our political discourse is grounded on notions of split patriotic consciousness, where we debate issues on the basis of our political preferences, our political likes and dislikes. So when you have a media space that has got non-partisan agendas, as he may wish for, based on what I see as an insinuation, you detox the public debate and move it away from the binaries of ZANU-PF, CCC and all of that, because at some point we need to discuss development. At some point we need to have a listener who is ZANU-PF, ZAPU and all of that, converging, using the media to interrogate human rights-based questions outside partisan lines, to say MPX has not been delivering on these issues that they pledged for. So we cannot run away from the political paradigm of the discursive framing of the media. But I think the partisan detoxification that comes with the framework of the community radio stations is a welcome development. But I'm yet to hear an argument around the legislative underpinning to that claim.
Okay, perfect.
Yeah.
He raises an interesting point.
Yes.
Do you feel mainstream media is doing enough in as far as tackling developmental issues is concerned?
Maybe not enough. We may still, as the media, need to do more, because remember that developmental issues are issues that concern the day-to-day life of our citizenry, right? And there is a lot that at times mainstream media ignore, right? And focus on what sells. And mostly what sells will be political subjects, political issues, as opposed to real developmental matters on the ground, right? When you write about a story that a clinic has been built, that's development, right? But you may find that it doesn't really sell as much as political stories and would do. So I think, yes, as mainstream media, we really need to do more, especially on the front of development, to speak about those issues because they concern our life.
Now, that brings us back to a point that you raised earlier on the national question. Now, do we have a national question as Zimbabwe where we would expect perhaps all media houses, despite of their different political ideologies, different editorial policies, all media houses converge on that national question?
Maybe before I respond to that, there is a point I want to expand from my learned colleague on the editorial deficiencies around development or information around development. I want to consider a mainstream media, let's say, that is located in Mtare, and maybe one that is located in Masvingo. And there is a major policy development in Victoria Falls, a major development project occurring in Harare. If we do not have funding for these media houses to also finance their access to stories, I think for me it's also a problem. So it means that as a matter of policy priority, we need to go beyond the issue of licensing, set budgets that give our media houses access to the stories, because sometimes you are here at ZTN, the Beitbridge Road, Masvingo Road is, you want to keep track of those issues, but the question is, do you have adequate revenue to pursue that? So I think we also need to think around a funding model that enables these new players to have access to stories, because their lack of access to stories also results in their lack of,
reporting.
Right. So what does that then mean to the national question? And maybe to answer your question, to say what is the national question? The national question is predicated on three values. The first one is the national liberation. To say what are the values, enduring values that inform our liberation, and what should we expect from our politicians across the political divide. We expect democracy, we expect anti-corruption policies, we expect peace, we expect an egalitarian society. That is the national liberation, pillar number one. Pillar number two is the national economy. How do we make good use of what we have? How do we eradicate the problems that cause family X not to get bread and family Y not to have money for school fees? So that is the politics of the bread and butter, what one scholar once referred to as the politics of the national purse, right? And then along that comes with the politics of public administration. And then the last but most fundamental pillar is that of national sovereignty and dignity. So basically, if you have got these three pillars, the triumvirate to the national question, or the trinity of the national question, that is your national liberation, national economy, and national sovereignty, you would not have people that debate issues because they hate perfect for belonging to a particular political party that they don't like. But perfect would be challenged on how they are fulfilling liberation values, they are fulfilling issues around the national economy and national sovereignty. You would not have embassies that are putting money to guide our editorial policy directions.
I would want Perfect to come in on this.
Yes.
He defined the national question. Is our media alive to the existence of this national question?
I think we are. This is why we have stories that deal with issues of corruption, where the media is exposing corruption day in, day out. But the problem is on the question of whether the media is free to do so, to what length can we go as the media in exposing corruption? And when we do so, are we still free as the media when we expose corruption? We know that what we have seen is that our journalists at times harassed and violated because they would have exposed some of these things. But I wanted to go back to the question that he raises on the issue of funding. We have been saying community radio stations at the moment are not supposed to get investment or funding from
Individuals.
Individuals, from anyone outside, or an investor from outside the country, for instance. They're not allowed. And remember that media itself also is a business, right? There are costs that come with the production of content. And if we do not do that, if we do not allow the space to have investment, then we have a problem. I think we need to deal with our laws to allow that investment to come through.
Maybe if we tap into Mahomva's knowledge here, what really informed this position?
I'm shocked. I'm hearing about this, a lot of things that are not allowed. I don't know, maybe it's because of my lack of depth with prevailing issues. But I think what is allowed or not allowed should be enabled by law, and I don't recall any law that number one does not allow this.
So for instance, the Broadcasting Services Act itself,
which is being amended, of course.
Yes, actually the amendment, some of the things that are being dealt with in the amendment, is to look at exactly the issue that I'm talking about, where no investment, especially foreign investment, is allowed in the media. So if you start a media company, you can't have a foreign partner to put resources. So the amendment is dealing with that, yes.
With that. But I want to understand what might have informed this position.
I think the Broadcasting Services Act, we will all agree that it's a very archaic document that was only predicated on preserving the monopoly of the then single broadcaster. So I think now, as the legislative landscape is evolving, we should put in debates that create favorable grounds for investment in the media, so that we transcend the political, firm grip on the media space. And I think it's a discussion in motion, and we should not give cognizance to some of these limitations that are in a legislation that is undergoing reform.
The law is archaic, and we're moving towards trying to amend that law. But as it stands, it is the law that binds all of us, and it is the law that we are following. What is happening, the limitations that we are seeing are limitations that are emanating from that law. And until such a time when we are going to amend it and agree that we have a new piece of legislation, then what he is talking about becomes life.
Okay, I'm afraid we have run out of time, and but we'll certainly continue with this discussion on same topic, same place, same time next week with the two of you.
Thank you.
Okay.
That is it for this week's edition of Fourth Estate. It's a wrap from us. Join us next week for another episode. Pleasant.